Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. Please take your seats and silence your cell phones. We have a full house tonight, so if there's any open seat next to you, please fill in. Once again, we have a full house tonight, so if there's an open seat next to you, please fill in. Thank you.
Hello and good evening. This is exciting. It is a full house and we are so happy you are all here. So thank you for coming. My name is Jenna Moe. I am the Senior Director of the Aspen Society. I'm a little out of breath because I ran up here, sorry, which is the philanthropic community of the Aspen Institute. And thank you to all of our members in the audience tonight for helping to make tonight and many of the other nights possible. Also special thanks to Crystal Logan, the Aspen Community Programs team, and of course the Aspen community supporters. Thank you all so much for being here. One more round of applause for Soledad and Bob Hurst, the underwriters of the Hurst series, for their support. Tonight's conversation, Navigating Disruption, Technology, Business, and the New Economic Landscape, features Scott Galloway, who is a best-selling author, a professor of marketing at NYU's Stern School of Business, an award-winning podcast host. Professor G and Pivot are both ranked in the top 100 podcasts globally. And his books, The Algebra of Wealth, and his newest book, Notes on Being a Man, which is available for pre-sale, are both available in the lobby after the talk, so please visit us there. And he is in conversation tonight with Gillian Tett, columnist and member of the editorial board of the Financial Times. Thank you both for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Well, thank you, and it is great to be here. And I can't think of many people who would create a standing room only auditorium at this time of the year. But I'm with a man who, in the world of intelligent podcasting, is a bit like Kim Kardashian. I don't know if you think that's a compliment or not, but you can take it. And I've got great news for all of you in Aspen, which is that Scott has just bought a house here. That's called a very easy crowd pleaser. Yeah. And it means it's going to be around...
For value reasons, so inexpensive. Well done.
What it means is you're going to get a chance to see a lot more of him. So that's great news. Although you're about to discover the joys of Aspen construction. So good luck on that one. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who will give you good advice. But you have had a fascinating trajectory. There's so much I want to ask you about. But let me start by asking a simple question, which is, as you can hear from my accent, I'm British. I was born in Britain. I'm based there for part of the year now because I'm overseeing King's College in Cambridge University. But I've actually become an American citizen as well a few years ago. Yep. And most of the Americans with transatlantic roots right now are trying to get to Europe. Whereas you have been living in London for the last few years, in a country that you describe as having a butler economy, not quite in the Downton Abbey sense, but in the sense that Brits keep serving rich Americans. And you've said you want to move back to America. Yeah. Why? I mean, you've also said recently the American myth is an illusion. You've made it clear you think President Trump is crazy. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. You hate most of his policies. You hate Elon Musk, and you've basically been saying that so much about America is wrong. So why do you want to come back here?
Hate's a strong word. I don't hate either of them. I just think they're terrible role models for young men and making America a much less noble place. Look, the honest truth is, around moving to London, around these decisions, I'm an influencer, not a decision maker. My life was like this up until I found someone who has a much better gut for big decisions, and she informed me we were moving to Europe. But it was, a lot of people have said, well, clearly you left the U.S., we don't blame you, it's terrible. I didn't move to Europe because of the U.S. I moved because the U.S. had offered me so much prosperity and freedoms and opportunity that I had the chance to offer my kids something wonderful and experience Europe, which is an extraordinary place. So I'll give you the pluses and the minuses for those of you who are ever thinking about moving to Europe. I've been molesting the planet for 30 years in business. I've spent 200 days plus a year on the road. And the reductive analysis is the following. America's the best place to make money, Europe's the best place to spend it. And the wine, you can get a really good bottle of $20 wine in Spain. The people in Britain are funny. They spend a lot of money on gardens that no one goes to, which is wonderful. Premier League football, proximity to the continent. It's just, Europe is just a wonderful place to spend a few years, and the idea of giving our kids something like that. We always planned to move back. I think my wife, who's from Europe, and my parents originally from the UK, would stay. But I was very moved. I'm on the board of 2 companies that were founded in Israel and now headquartered in New York. And then when October the 7th happened, on the 8th, the boards independently of each of those companies tried to find the CEOs and just say, hope and trust your family is okay. And we couldn't find them. And so everyone's kind of pinging each other. Have you seen Nadav? Have you seen Noam? The next day they got on planes for Israel. And that inspired me. I think that what's going on here is, I think it's a time to come home and fight. This is...
Well, fight to make America great again?
No, make America America again. We live in this cold comfort. I've been saying for a while, and my father accused me of being alarmist, there's a lot of echoes of 1930s Germany. If you were to look at the most enlightened culture over the last 200 years, thriving economy, thriving gay community, an embrace of immigrants, an embrace of education, most historians would say that Germany was #1, except for an 11-year descent into darkness. And a lot of the same things, an overrun of our judicial system, a lack of separation between business and state, a strongman, an economic shock, a lot of young men with a lack of economic or romantic opportunities, extreme nationalism, looking for scapegoats. I just think we're a lot more like Germany in the 30s than we want to believe. And to believe that it can't happen here, we were rounding up people and putting them in camps because of their Japanese ancestry, despite the fact they might have sons fighting for us in the European theater just 80 years ago. So to think that can't happen here is just not true. So I think for all of us, this is a time to be in the fight, and that good Americans who have benefited as extraordinarily as I have from some of the principles have an obligation to come back, and I'll just tick through them. I got assisted lunch when I was a kid. Not free lunch, assisted lunch. And one of the wonderful things I've always thought about California assisted lunch is they send the coupons, or they did in the 70s I was raised by a single mother, they send the coupons to your house such that you wouldn't be embarrassed. I love that, right? Such you have the same coupons as everybody else. I got and I talk about this openly, and my mom wouldn't have had an issue with this. My mom got pregnant at the age of 47. When I was 17, I was a senior in high school. I'd just been accepted to UCLA. And living in California, we had access to safe, affordable family planning. If we hadn't, I would have done what any good son does. I would have dropped out of high school, and I would have taken care of my mom or helped out, right? But that wasn't an issue. And then when I got to UCLA, which, by the way, had a 74% admissions rate when I applied, this year it'll be 9%, I got Pell Grants, right? Access to safe, affordable planning, school lunch, Pell Grants, all under attack. And then I came out of college, and because I had the intelligence to be born in California, I came into the internet.
I think your mother had the intelligence to live in California.
Well, I've said the best decision I ever made was being born in America. And so my parents took this huge risk to pay it off for me. But the reason I get to live in Aspen is because middle-class households made these extraordinary investments vis-a-vis taxes and universities and forward-leaning visionary elected leaders to say, let's build a giant communications network such that post-nuclear attack we can communicate with each other. That's DARPA. And it costs too much money for the private sector. Let's try and figure out a way to put a missile in Khrushchev's pocket. That's GPS. That's Apple. That's Amazon. That's the internet. That's e-commerce. And if we continue to spend as recklessly as we are right now, it's going to crowd out all ability to make these forward-leaning investments in technology that create this type of economic growth. In addition, I was able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in my 30s, and a lot of those companies failed. But there was always, if you were a good person and trying hard, there was always access to capital. And why do we have such extraordinary amounts of capital? Because we had rule of law, and we had consistency, and we were seen as good trading partners. All of those things are under attack. And by the way, in Europe, whose economy really hasn't, there's been more economic growth within the 7-mile radius of SFO International Airport in the last 10 years, and there's been in all of Europe since World War II. There is $5 million in capital available for every startup in the US. There's $1 million in Europe. And a lot of that, I believe, is a variety of things, risk aggressiveness, great universities, but we were always seen as a reliable trading partner. Every company I've started has done at least a third of its business overseas. And when I walked into LVMH or Samsung or, gosh, I'm trying to think of another one, or Natura in Brazil, they liked us. They wanted to work with Americans. They generally thought, yeah, they're obnoxious, they're full of themselves, but at the end of the day, they're smart and they're the good guys. We were always thought of as the good people, and now I think that's under attack. So literally every reason I get to be here and live the life I lead is under attack. And those of us who have recognized this prosperity have an obligation to make sure that some of those wonderful things still stay in place, because they are everything I've mentioned is under attack.
Well, absolutely. So how are you going to fight back? Other than moving here and helping Aspen real estate prices? Or rather, helping the construction industry here?
Well, I have a platform.
Do you want to run for president yourself?
No, I have most of the attributes to run for president. I'm white, male, a narcissist, and a little bit of money. But so when you tell a 50-something-year-old narcissist he should run for president, he's inclined to believe you. So I thought about it for a hot minute, and I believe in transparency. I got a call from some Democratic operatives, and they said, we'll raise you $10 million, you put in $10 million, and you're going to run. And I thought about it, and I said, I don't think I can win. And they're like, it's not about winning, it's about shaping the conversation. And what I've decided is, I think to be cynical about our current pool of candidates is just cynical. There's some amazing, I just had Gretchen Whitmer on my podcast, incredibly impressive person. The person about to be governor here, Michael Bennett, is an incredibly impressive person. We have so many
Bennett fans here.
We have so many fantastic people who decide to be public servants that I've decided the best way I can fight back is to get very involved in trying to flip the House in 26 and then get very involved in a campaign for 28. And I interview all the candidates. Every presidential candidate has taken an interest in me. They call me and say, we should have dinner. I'm like, you want to come on the podcast? You're running for president. Don't bullshit me. When do you want to come on? And there's just a ton of amazing people out there. So the way I can do it is to bring attention to them, use my time, treasure, and my talent to find great Americans to get into elected office and then into the White House. That's
okay, so what are you seeing happening then before 2026 to Donald Trump? Because just today we have a new news cycle about the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Yeah.
We've got MAGA possibly beginning to split around this. We've got a war of distraction by the people around Trump to try and toss out toys to distract us all every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to make a prediction, would you bet on Trump continuing to remain as dominant for the next year or so? Because, you know, I recently chatted to Curtis Yarvin, the blogger, and, you know, what he would argue is actually there was a huge momentum behind Trump in the first few months, but actually, in his eyes, it's now petering out.
So I think I have a better than average track record predicting business outcomes. I have a worse than average track record of predicting political outcomes. Every time I thought there was a red line that he'd crossed, I was wrong. It wasn't a red line. And I don't think Trump is the biggest threat. The reality is he's a 79-year-old obese man who doesn't have a lot of love in his life. Those people usually don't make it to 90. I think he's going to die soon. And I don't wish that on anyone, but I don't. Folks, biology's undefeated. And
don't tell the Silicon Valley bros that.
And just to be bipartisan.
Longevity industry doesn't believe you, but yes.
Anyone who listens to my podcast know that before it was cool, I was saying Biden was too goddamn old to run for president, and that he was a narcissist for thinking he could beat biology at the expense of America. It was insane that he decided to run for president again. And Bill Maher called me an ageist. I'm like, yeah, I am an ageist. And you know who else is ageist? Biology. We absolutely...
And you just turned 60, is that right?
I did, but naked I look 59 7/8. We need term limits. You're going to put an 80-year-old... How can we age gate at the lower end, and then we have these conversations with our parents where we tell them they can't drive, but they should run for president? Enough already. 76, you're out. 16 years. They do this in the UK. They do it all over the world. We have, and this is a big part of the problem, 2/3 of Congress is going to be dead in 25 years. Do you think they're really worried about the deficit or the climate? Do you think they have really interesting, fresh ideas and can look at the economy in a new way and understand these technologies? Washington has become a cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. This is insane. Get these people out. They're too fucking old.
All right, so you got the crowd on that one. But in terms of, do you think that there's any sign that the Trump momentum is faltering? Never mind his age.
It took a sex scandal to be the first bipartisan action of this Congress. And who would have thought that a man found guilty of rape would complicate the release of the Epstein files? That's a shocker. Look, I thought this was going to blow over. I got this wrong. And my pivot co-host said, no, this is a big deal. The thing that is just so strange about this, though, is that people that seem so maniacal about it, my sense is, are they really concerned about pedophilia, or they want validation of their conspiracy? It just seems so strange to me. So I'm down for anything that gets that bitch out of office. I'm like, I don't care what it is. I think this is I think we're on a terrible path. I think he's hired a group of incompetents. I just think this is anything that diminishes his power. I think by the midterms, his power, he's a lame duck. The thing I'm most worried about, I think probably the most frightening person in the world right now is a guy named Peter Thiel. And I think that J.D. Vance is smarter and much younger, and I think this techno-libertarian weird vision of the future that could permeate MAGA and the White House, I think that's a bigger threat. Biology is going to take care of Trump.
Would you have Curtis Yarvin on your show?
I'm sorry, would I have who?
Curtis Yarvin, the grey mirror guy. The one who's creating a lot of the intellectual ideas for Peter Thiel and people like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty promiscuous. Anything for clicks.
You'd get clicks for that one.
I got a house to build in Starwood.
All right, so you've said that in a world where, in Washington, which is full of, old people and golden girls, you think the only grown-ups in the room right now is a bond market. If you don't want to predict politics, when does a bond market blow up?
If we were to say, okay, the economy had crashed, and you had to predict or try and guess what had taken it down. Say we knew that in 3, 6, 24 months the bond market or the equity markets had crashed, I would bet that it would be an unwinding of AI, that some companies announced they're not spending as much on AI, NVIDIA reports a bad quarter, because keep in mind, 40% of the S&P, let's go global.
Is tech.
50% of the market capitalization of all stocks globally is represented by the S&P. And if you add in debt, enterprise value is equity value plus debt. If you add in the debt, then 70% of all of the value in the world is represented by U.S. corporations. So if someone said to you, you can either buy every company in the U.S. for $70 or every other company in the world outside of the U.S. for $30, I would argue that you would probably say, I'll take every other company in the world for $30. So I think our markets are inflated. And I think the prick that pops the bubble is that 40% of the S&P, which represents 50% of the world's market cap, is basically being driven by the expectations that AI is going to continue to grow massively. So I think the first signal that maybe AI isn't as big as we are anticipating or the markets had hoped for, I think that's when you see a real unwinding. And the reason why I think there's a non-zero probability that happens is the following. If you think about the most seminal technologies in history, right up there, I would argue, I'm about to get on a plane and fly at 8/10 the speed of sound across the surface of the atmosphere, and I'll be in Chicago in 2 hours for what just 100 years ago meant scurvy and death. And, jet transportation technology has been an unbelievable unlock for the global economy and our ability to connect with one another.
Well, not when you're dealing with Aspen weather always, but anyway, good luck.
But if you added up all the profits and losses of every aircraft manufacturer and every airline, it's at break even right now. It still hasn't made any money. PCs. In 2006, I raised $80 million and became the largest shareholder in Gateway Computer. I realize this is the weakest flex in the world. Does anyone remember Gateway?
This is your demographic, so they do.
Right. They were the second largest PC manufacturer in the world. We sold 3 times as many computers as Apple. Now, granted, we sold them at 8 points of gross margin, and Apple was selling them at 30. But what has been a bigger unlock for global productivity than the technology that put basically a $50 million supercomputer on your desk for $1,000, $400, $300, right? No one's been able to make money on PCs. You would say it's Apple. No, Apple was the iPhone. The PC business has been terrible. Asus, Commodore, Compaq. Why? Because these companies in jet transportation and PCs were not able to sequester value to any small group of companies through IP, through distribution channels, through capital. And I wonder if AI is more like the PC industry and airlines than it is search, social, or Hopper, NVIDIA GPU chips. What do I mean by that? I think that we're all going to win from AI. I'm just not sure any one small group of companies is going to be able to capture trillions of value, which is what shareholders are banking on. And the reason I flip to this viewpoint that this industry might be more like PCs and jets than search, social, or AI chips is when DeepSeek came out. So we decided we placed an embargo on the most sophisticated chips for the Chinese. They obviously see AI as a priority. And all of a sudden, DeepSeek pops up and says, we have an LLM almost as good as OpenAI or ChatGPT, but we did it with 10% of the compute power on a fraction of the cost. And my favorite moment was if you ask DeepSeek, who are you? It said, I'm OpenAI. So the first job, the first person being put out of business by AI is AI. And that is, I believe there's a decent chance that no LLM will be able to get that far out ahead of any other LLM because the AI is going to be able to reverse engineer any attribute or point of differentiation, creating an explosion in value, but no one or small set of companies is going to be able to capture the value we think they're going to. That is what I would predict would be the massive kind of drawdown in the markets. So far, I have been wrong. AI valuations continue to climb.
But there's a bunch of people on Wall Street now who are actually arguing that and saying it's second-order effects that are going to be most important. And the trick is really identifying the second-order effect companies that will actually end up benefiting most of all. But what about the bond market? You dodged that one.
So,
I mean, the debt levels are rising. We
Sure.
just added another 3 to 4 trillion with a big, beautiful bill. I mean, I find it hilarious that, triple B is the tagline, and triple B basically means practically junk bond.
yeah,
There's a lack of self-awareness, if nothing else.
Look, if you look at interest rates historically, interest rates are around average. They're not especially high. What's especially high is we got used to a zero-rate environment, and from George Washington to George Bush, we borrowed $7 trillion, and since George Bush, we've borrowed another $30 trillion. George Bush treated us like children, and we acted like children, and that is, he told us, I have an idea. I can cut taxes and we can go to war. And we believed him. And we decided, we can do that. We can continue to run up these deficits. And the people in this room, including myself, continue to benefit from this $7 trillion a year in spending on $5 trillion in receipts, which is nothing but a transfer of wealth from young to old, from the past to the future, and from the poor to the rich. We're in the club doing champagne and cocaine, and the closest our kids get is they get to throw in their credit card. And we're running up this massive debt. Now, it's starting to creep in where when people show up for our treasuries, they keep saying, what happens if they don't show up? They'll always show up. We're just going to have to increase the risk premium and pay them more to buy our bonds, which takes the interest rate up. And now the interest on our debt is the largest expenditure on of our federal payments, which crowds out investments in technology and education, or our ability to fight a war, or our ability to spend a lot if we go into another recession. In sum, we have been so fucking irresponsible, this generation, all of us here. Think about this. If the American economy was a household, it would be making $50,000 a year, spending $70,000, and have debt of $370,000 that our kids will inherit when we die. I mean, this is just no way to act like adults. At some point, and I coach a lot of Democrats, I work with the Democratic Party on messaging, I think the biggest opportunity for Democrats right now is to say, we're the adults in the room. All right, spending $7 trillion, taking in $5 trillion, that's not sustainable. So do we either raise taxes or cut spending? At some point, someone has to go, yes, we need to do both, folks. Stop treating us like children and stop acting like children, just assuming at some point we'll figure it out. The deficit and interest, as reflected by interest rates creeping up, and the fact that we're going to spend more than $1 trillion just on the interest in our debt, really is a crisis. And the reason why every fiat currency has gone away, has failed in the history of the world, is because the short-term political temptation to print more money based on a short-term political cycle and just hope our kids figure it out is too great. And eventually the dollar will go away. I just hope it goes away in 50 or 100 years, not in the next 10 or 20. But the bond market is the adult in the room right now.
So President Trump's response to all this is to threaten to fire Jay Powell. What do you think the impact of that will be if it happens? And do you expect that to happen?
Well, that's not a fear right now. I love these weapons of mass distraction. This is what's going on in the White House. Like, this is something I'm totally comfortable saying is almost a certainty. There's a group of 8 comms people in a room and AI, and their job is to every day beta test a bunch of stuff that they can throw out into the market, no matter how ridiculous, how stupid, how inane it is, that gets the term Epstein off of a chyron on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox.
Hasn't worked today.
Okay, well, let's change the name of the Washington Commanders. Let's revoke the citizenship of a Tier 2 talk show host because I don't like her. A letter, I'm firing Jay Powell. I'm firing him. He can't fire him. Unless Congress decides to change it, you can't fire him. And by the way, the bond market hates that. It crashed as soon as he threatened it. But it wasn't ever going to happen. Oh, but it got Epstein out of the news cycle. And then the next day, he said, I know, say I was only kidding. And the next day he said, it's not true, I was only kidding. Just keep Epstein out of the cycle. So it's hilarious. It's going to be fun to see what comes out tomorrow. It's just 85% tariffs on Canada? Canada? When did we decide we didn't like Canada? Anyway, so these weapons of mass distraction, my sense is they're sort of working, but I can tell you they're in a room with AI going, what could we say? It doesn't matter how stupid it is. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. It doesn't matter if we're never going to do it. It doesn't matter if it makes me look like an ass. Anything that gets Epstein off the chyron.
Okay, so let's switch gear then. I was hiking up the Utah Trail this afternoon, and quite slowly, I just landed, and I was actually playing part of your podcast. I was cramming before
Thank you.
I saw you.
I need you to listen more.
Okay, and somebody who may be in the room stopped me and heard your voice and said how psyched he was about tonight and coming here. I think
right.
He's probably here somewhere. Yep, absolutely, with his son.
Oh, nice.
And his big question, I asked him, what do you want to know? And his big question, which I think a lot of parents in the room want to know, is if you have sons, how do you raise them today to have a sense of self-respect at a time when a lot of popular culture on campuses and elsewhere is basically saying that the phrase straight white male, straight white guy is almost an insult? How are you going to deal with this issue of a lack of confidence in masculinity today? Because you've written a lot about it. You've talked very movingly about the issue of mental health, of teen suicides. You have decided to donate much of your speaking fees, and by the way, this isn't a speaking fee event tonight, but you're currently donating much of your speaking fees to anti-suicide charities, which is wonderful.
Thank you.
And those speaking fees, I should say, are darn big. But you've given a lot of money, millions, to anti-suicide charities and charities for teen mental health. What do you think we need to do collectively, and what advice would you give to parents in the room who have sons right now?
So I'm
other than take them hiking on the Utah Trail.
There you go. I'm going to punt on the first one because the reality is I just don't have the domain expertise or the credibility to speak to good parenting. You know the basics, right? You try and make sure they know they're loved. Sports, be good to their mom. You know the basics, but be clear. I have no domain expertise around parenting. I'm still banging on the door of the bathroom when my kid's in there on TikTok saying, start masturbating. I get so pissed off. He's in there on his on his phone. So look, I can't even pretend to advise you on parenting. I think that there is no group in American history, well, let's say the last 50 years, that has fallen further faster than young men. If you go into a morgue and there's 5 people who've died by suicide, 4 are men. Young men are 3 times more likely to be addicted. We don't have a homeless or an opiate crisis. We have a male homeless and a male opiate crisis. Only 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 is in a relationship, whereas 2 in 3 women under the age of 30 are in a relationship. And you think, well, that's mathematically impossible. It's not, because women are dating older because they want more economically and emotionally viable partners. We're at 60-40. Female to male college attendance. It's probably going to be 2 to 1 soon because males drop out at a greater rate. And if a man hasn't cohabitated with a woman or been married by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he becomes a substance abuser. And you think, well, okay, Scott, your hair's on fire now. You've had a 3,000-year head start. And all of a sudden you're worried about young men. I would argue the conversation has gotten so much more productive in the last 5 years because when you said it 5 years ago, there was an immediate, understandable gag reflex that you were just a thinly veiled misogynist, because a lot of the voices feeling the quote-unquote pro-man movement, it was just thinly veiled misogyny. But the reason this conversation has gotten so much more productive the last 1-2 years is, you know who's really weighed in on this topic is mothers. And I hear from mothers every day, and the conversation goes something like this. I got 3 kids, 2 daughters, 1 son. 1 daughter's at Penn, the other daughter's in PR, and my son's in the basement playing video games and vaping. And what you have with a series of young men, a cohort of young men who aren't connecting to work, they're not connecting to school, they're not connecting to relationships, you're ending up with the most dangerous person on the planet, and that is a person without a lot of options. And if you look at the most unstable, violent periods in history, the one commonality is a lack of opportunity for young men. And I worry that because the deepest, most talented people in the world with godlike technology have one mission, and that is to convince a young man that he can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. Why go through the pecking order and the effort of having friends when you can go on Discord or Reddit? Why put on a tie, get up in the morning, not get high the night before, and go in and try and get a job when you can make money trading stocks or crypto on Robinhood or Coinbase? And for God's sakes, why would any young man, right, stay in shape, have a plan, develop a sense of humor, develop the resilience to endure rejection and approach women and realize you're going to endure rejection. Demonstrate kindness. Demonstrate excellence. Be persistent. Why would any man do that when you have porn at home? And so we are evolving an asocial, asexual male. And these young men, if they don't start connecting to something, they become much more prone to conspiracy theory. They start blaming women for the romantic problems. They start blaming immigrants for their economic problems. They become much more prone to nationalistic content. In some, they become really shitty citizens. And the question is, well, why is the loneliness crisis not as dangerous for women? The reality is when women don't have a romantic relationship, they pour that additional energy into their friend network and their professional lives. When men don't have the guardrails of a relationship, they pour it into video games and porn and conspiracy theory. So the young male, what it ends up, remember the kind of the myth of, oh, the poor woman 35 who never found a romantic relationship.
And got a cat.
And got a cat. Oh, that's a poor her. The reality is relationships are much more important for young men than young women. Much more important. When men don't have the guardrails of a relationship or a strong male role model, they literally come off the tracks. So what it ends up, if you look at this, I want to get to solutions. If you look at the single point of failure for when a young man becomes more prone to some of the negative things we're talking about, the single point of failure we can reverse engineer to is when they lose a male role model. And 92%, we have the most single parent homes of any nation in the world. We just passed Sweden. And 92% of those single parent homes are mothers. And I want to be clear, my mom was my hero, raised me on her own on a secretary's salary. But when a young man loses a male role model, at that moment, he becomes more likely, think about this, you know someone, they get divorced, and the boy in the household doesn't have a male role model present. At that moment, that boy becomes more likely to be incarcerated than graduate from college. And things are getting worse. Boys are maturing later, their testicles are descending later, and women are menstruating earlier. The gap in maturity is broadening. The prefrontal cortex of a male is 18 months behind a female. So your daughter who's graduating from high school is competing against a 10th grader to get into college. They make really shitty decisions, right? I always describe myself, I'm not a dad, I'm a prefrontal cortex. So you think you can go to school without your shoes? Walk me through that. Right? Anyone who has boys and girls, my 14-year-old had a Halloween party with his class. The boys are just dopes. They can't look you in the eye. And I'm not exaggerating. There were 2 or 3 14-year-old girls there that could be the junior senator from Pennsylvania. So when I just want to, but keep in mind, just 3-4 years ago, if you said something about boys need men in their lives, it's like, well, you're saying women can't raise boys? Or even to acknowledge there's a difference between boys and girls was seen as not having any empathy for the non-binary community. And that's not true at all. And we're finally having a conversation that boys are more prone to certain attributes that are, quite frankly, holding them back in this economy, and they're not doing as well. And I think we're finally coming to the recognition that our country isn't going to continue to flourish, and neither are women if our boys are flailing. And it doesn't mean, and by the way, we should celebrate. There's some wonderful things. Women are now making more money in urban centers than men. Single women now own more homes. The number of women elected to parliament globally has doubled in the last 30 years. These are amazing. This is a collective victory. And the first place we need to start is, I believe in alliances. I believe the next president needs to go around the world on the longest apology tour in history. I think Republicans absolutely, and Democrats, moderates, need to restore some sense of alliance through national service where our young people grow up to think of themselves as Americans, not as Republicans or Democrats.
So you'd put boys into military service, would you?
Or health care, or senior care, or smoke jumpers, or cleaning trash in parks.
Civil service as well.
You need to see yourself as an American first, and you need to be introduced to people from different sexual orientations, different ethnic groups, different income backgrounds. And recognize that, okay, maybe shit is real for them too, and you should have empathy for that group, right? The lowest levels of teen depression in a modern society are in Israel, despite all the existential threats. Why? Because they all serve in the same uniform. I just met with an IDF battalion, all these young, beautiful men and women learning to depend on each other for their lives, learning to handle assault rifles, and learning to do something in the agency of bigger than themselves, and then recognizing that that Bedouin kid has his own issues. And that gay kid is not that different than me. And they grow up with a sense of purpose and a sense of community. No Israeli introduces themselves as conservative or liberal. There's not. I mean, they have political spectrums and parties. So I think we need to think about restoring alliances, thinking about Americans. But the biggest alliance that needs healing is the greatest alliance in history, and it's frayed. The greatest alliance in history is the alliance between men and women. It's literally where it all starts, folks. And the genders have done an amazing job based on algorithms trying to convince you. The genders have done a great job deciding that it's the other gender's fault. Young men believe that the ascent of women is the reason for their descent. No, it's not. Thank God women have come into the workforce. Thank God we have strong women, right? And at the same time, young women on TikTok will tell young men, you don't have problems, you are the problem. That doesn't help either. The far right is conflating masculinity with coarseness and cruelty. Of course that's wrong. Of course that's wrong. At the same time, on the far left, you know what the advice is to young men around masculinity? Act more like a woman. That's not productive either. So we need, I think men and women, we need this gestalt that says, okay, young men have to be trained to do the following. Celebrate their sister's success. Recognize the world has changed. Protect. We are physically stronger and bigger. The most masculine jobs in the world are, think about it, fireman, cop, military serviceman or woman. What do? They protect. It breaks my heart now. There's surveys showing in New York, women don't feel safe on the subway. Why? Because they say there's too many men. We absolutely need to train our boys to say, the moment you see anyone who looks like they might feel threatened, they need to feel safe around you because you're a man, right? And I believe more generally the whole point of prosperity is protection, right? And that's what I don't get about the tech community. They don't seem very solid in protection. But going back to alliances, I think women on TikTok, young women, need to stop this bullshit of having no empathy for young men, and young men need to immediately back out of this ridiculous notion that women doing well is anything but a wonderful thing that is helping them in America. We need to restore this alliance. Masculine and feminine energy in a household makes for an outstanding household. And by the way, sometimes that masculine energy is brought by someone born as a woman, and the feminine energy is brought by someone born as a man. But let's lean into our femininity. Let's lean into our masculinity. We have been celebrating femininity. Let's start developing an aspirational vision of masculinity and then recognizing how wonderful it is. Men are more risk aggressive, and that's a wonderful thing. When Russian troops come pouring over the border in Ukraine, you want some of that big dick energy. And by the way, when the Carnegie Foundation gives out awards each year for what's called the burning house effect. These are people who risk their own lives in the moment to save other lives, right? Literally running into the burning house. Last year they gave out 81 awards, 77 were men. Some of the risk aggressiveness of men is a wonderful thing, right? Some of the attributes of masculinity. I think being a procreator, I think wanting sex is a wonderful thing if it's channeled correctly. Makes you want to be economically secure. Makes you want to be kind. Makes you want to shower, for God's sakes. Maybe think about how you look, right? Demonstrate excellence. Have a plan. Be persistent. Express physical desire, right? Do you know how much shit I get when I think women want to be wanted? I think it's a wonderful thing to be wanted. And when I start coaching young men, one of the first things I say to them is, would you have sex with you?
I think you're talking yourself into running a summer camp here in Aspen for young men. You know, we have here a ready-made coach ready for all your sons and grandsons.
There you go.
But we're going to have to go to...
Men and women, let's come together.
Well, that is definitely a crowd pleaser. I know that we're not officially into the time for questions yet, but I can just see from your faces you're dying to jump in there. You have a lot of things to jump on and ask about. So if anyone would like to ask a question, if we have the mics ready, raise your hands. I'm sure we'll have a number. I'm going to start actually unusually right at the back. That guy in the back, the lights in my eyes, gets a prize for actually sticking his hand up immediately. In fact, even before I asked.
Well,
so on the basis of nothing ventured, nothing gained, go for it.
I'm not sure if this is on.
And by the way, it would be courteous but not compulsory to say your name, and keep it short, because I want to get as many as possible.
Sure. Scott, my name's Arjiv. I have a quick question. You mentioned that you are working with the Democratic Party on messaging. One of the things that Donald Trump is amazing about is he is very able to simplify things and sell it to the quote-unquote common man or woman. How are you advising the Democratic Party in explaining to them the long-term risks of a lot of these policies, and how are you getting them to simplify those answers?
And can they hire you as a meme producer effectively. By the way, I think your official title at NYU was Clinical Professor of Marketing. I'm not quite sure what a clinical professor of marketing is.
It means we don't have a PhD.
Okay.
It means we have no academic credibility.
It's probably a good thing.
It's true.
Yeah, it's clinical, right. So, okay, so what would you do to get the Democrats back on track with messaging?
I'm not good at taglines. My major piece of advice is the following, is responding to how awful they are is not a strategy. It's got to be, well, here are our ideas. So the first thing, and I was pushing for this and I failed, I thought the Democrats should have proposed their own tax bill. And that way, when they put up the big, beautiful bill, they would have put out the Democratic bill. And the Democrats are like, the basic strategy of the Democrats right now is, if your enemy is doing something stupid, stay out of their way. That's their strategy, and I understand it. I thought we should have proposed our own Democratic, where we said, okay, alternative minimum tax for corporations that have their lowest tax rate since 1939. Alternative minimum tax for anyone making over $10 million of at least 40%. Reduce the estate tax exemption from $30 million to $1 million. Keep military spending flat. Let's have a tax bill that takes us back, slowly but surely, to a surplus. And every time Fox or CNN or MSNBC put up the big, beautiful bill, they would have put up this bill. And they said, well, it's never going to pass. I'm like, that's not the point. The Democrats need to, again, be the adults in the room having these difficult conversations and demonstrating something called leadership, which, quite frankly, usually means pissing everybody off. So my big message to the Democrats are, we have to spend less time going, oh, my God, can you believe they did this? This is awful. And say, well, what the fuck would we do? What are we going to do? What are you proposing? What would you have done, right? That's, you know, all right, what is your plan for the defense industry? We don't need to spend this much. We can take down $100 billion based on what's happening in Ukraine. We have asymmetric, we're going to have the best asymmetric warfare plan in history. There is no reason that we have an estate exemption of $30 million because money is important for happiness. Daniel Kahneman, who's a hero of mine, did a lot of research, Israeli-American psychologist, on the relationship between money and happiness. And the bad news is money can buy happiness. Middle-income people are happier than lower income. Upper income are happier than middle income. The good news is it tops out. Once you get to a certain point, no incremental happiness. So if your kids are going to inherit $7 million versus $9 million, doesn't matter. They're no happier. You're obviously not going to be any less or more happier because you're going to be gone. So when we have $30 trillion, what you want in a tax system is taxes that are the least taxing possible. So let's bring the estate tax exemption down from $30 million to $1 million, alternative minimum tax on anyone making more than $10 million, which doesn't make you any happier, of 40%. Our tax code is so screwed up. You know who really gets screwed in our tax code? What I call the super earners. Mom owns 4 chiropractic clinics. Stephen Colbert, right, makes $10, $15 million a year. He pays 53% tax rates, right? But if you make your living buying and selling stocks or starting companies and selling them, yours truly, I'm very open about my finances. My average tax rate the last 10 years has been 17%. By the way, the analyst working for me making $160,000 pays 6% Social Security, pays $9,000. I made about 100 times that last year. What did I pay in Social Security tax? $9,000. Our tax system has gone from 400 pages to 4,000, and those incremental 3,600 pages are there basically to screw the middle class. So I want, long-winded way of saying, the Democrats need to move out of indignation and clutching their pearls and actually have some ideas that are bold and courageous and hard conversations.
Right. Well, I think at this point there are probably a lot of people in the room who are wishing that you would run for president. But anyway, we've got a question back there. The woman, I think it's a woman I can't see. Yeah, just actually, all right, there and then further back.
Hi, my name is Leisha. So I was hearing a couple weeks ago a lot of companies were buying a bunch of crypto and their stock prices were popping up. And then today I heard that Kohl's stock went up 30% because they're now a meme stock.
Yeah.
Could you explain what's going on there and where this is headed?
So I understand crypto and meme stocks better than 99% of the population, and I do not understand them.
Do you buy them?
This is, generally speaking, I just made my first crypto purchase because I'm just so sick of missing out on everything. And I believe in diversification as you get older. Look, the larger meta effect around crypto and meme stocks is the following. The reason I get to live the life I lead is that in 2008, economic cycles go up and down. And basically down cycles are disruption when the economy goes bad, whether war, economic cycle. It's a natural and healthy transfer of wealth from the incumbents to the entrants. There's war. The guy who owns the factory loses everything, but they still need the construction worker, right? The reason I get to lead the life I lead is because in 2008, we bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. $700 billion, right? And we let the economy fall. And just as I was coming into my prime income earning years, I got to buy Netflix, Amazon, and Apple for $8, $10, and $12 a share, respectively. Now they're somewhere between $250 and $1,400. But then what happened is old people figured out a way, baby boomers, that they could vote themselves more money and smooth out the cycles. And then when COVID happened, we said, okay, 1 million people dying would be bad, but what would be worse is if me, the boomer, got less wealthy. So we pumped $7 trillion into the economy and artificially maintained asset prices. And then this newest generation is not dumb. They look at it and they go, houses are $3 million in Brooklyn. Stocks are trading at P's of 30, and you won't let them come down to natural levels of disruption. So what am I going to do? I'm going to invent my own asset classes and my own volatility. And this is them saying, look, boss, easy for you to say. Everyone in this room is part of something called NIMBYism. One of the reasons I'm in Aspen real estate is because baby boomers in this town will continue to weaponize the housing code and make it almost impossible for entrants and make it impossible for young people to buy a house. You don't think they notice this and they're getting pissed off? Oh, and by the way, don't let my stocks go down. Spend $7 trillion on $5 trillion in receipts. Keep the markets elevated, baby. What does that mean for young people who can't afford a house or a stock? We've smoothed out disruption. That is nothing. When you bail out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant during COVID with the CARES Act, all you're doing is robbing opportunity from the 26-year-old recent graduate of a culinary academy that wants her shot. Everybody here has probably at some point made a lot of money taking advantage of disruption where we let the economy fall. But we've decided, the incumbents have decided, no more volatility. We want to stay rich. So young people sense this and they're creating their own volatility by leveraging new mediums such as Reddit to try and inspire a run-up in meme stocks, or they're creating their own assets, crypto. Now, I don't understand them. Bitcoin has established itself as a store of value. But I see a larger movement here where younger people are like, I can't afford a house. You keep artificially inflating the stock market. It's too late for me. So I've got to create my own assets and my own volatility.
Right. Okay. Any more questions from the middle section? Again, we've got a very eager hand right at the very back. So I'm going to reward endeavor.
If Powell makes it to next May, when his term is over, who do you think is going to be replaced? And it looks like the interest rates will go down a lot, which will, of course, affect the bonds market. What do you think is going to happen if that happens, or if you see a different scenario?
The honest answer is don't. If I had to pick someone, it would probably be Scott Bessent, because he wants the job, and my understanding is he has a lot of credibility within the administration, and people in the markets actually respect and like him. I think Chairman Powell is probably the most seminal figure in the global economy over the last 20 years. He took interest rates, he took inflation from 9% to 2% without a recession. I was a graduate student instructor in micro and macroeconomics. I would have told you that's impossible. It was not only a soft landing, he stuck the landing. And he got shit from the far left who were telling him to lower interest rates. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, you realize what this has done to the average American's mortgage rate and auto loan? And then the far right saying you got to cut interest rates to prop up the economy. And he said, sorry, and he raised interest rates 500 bips in 15 months. No Fed chair has ever done that. And he took inflation and he beat the shit out of it. And if you want to talk about how nations fail, they're usually not invaded. They usually go broke. And the way they go broke is inflation. Chairman Powell will absolutely, in the next Democratic administration, be awarded the National Medal of Freedom, and he'll deserve it. He has done a masterful job. My dream would be for him to be reappointed. If I had to guess, it would be someone like Bessent.
Right. Okay. Question there in the middle.
Thank you to you both. This has been a very refreshing conversation. My name is Bobby Dunphy. I'm Australian. And I see things with a slightly different lens than most Americans. And many of my Australian friends and family are saying, well, you're going to be coming home now. And I'm like, no, I'm staying here because I want to stay here to fight. So thank you for coming. I don't really have a question except to say thank you.
Thank you.
So many people leaving this country right now. I think that's the worst move.
Great.
What I do wonder is whether we see this as the potential demise of the American empire. And the other thing that I wonder is whether or not there is a possibility there will not be the midterms nor the election in 4 years. And
okay, those are two great questions. They're big questions in 4 minutes. Okay, you've got 3 minutes to talk about the end of the American empire, coming or not. I think even for Scott, that's going to be a tall order. I'm going to keep you to time, which is an even taller order.
Things have been worse. There's no reason we can't come back stronger. I'm a huge fan of Heather Cox Richardson, the historian. The 1850s and 60s, slave owners held all the power. And there were a large part of the nation, the most economically powerful part of the nation, declared war, and we declared war on them, and it was brother against brother. I mean, that was pretty bad. The Gilded Age had the same level of income inequality. So the key is, if good people get involved and appreciate their blessings and try to shove the ladders down behind them, I don't see any reason why we can't come out of this stronger. We just can't be lazy. We can't take for granted our blessings, but I absolutely see that there's enormous potential for us to vomit out what has happened. I think a lot of people are really on both sides of the aisle are really distressed about what's going on. So I'm cautiously optimistic that that this has motivated people to rise up and take a more active role in America and restoring America.
Okay, last question here in the front. We've not had any front row questions yet. Normally they get the first. Got a microphone just coming for you. Make it short because we're almost out of time.
My name's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I'm curious your thoughts on loneliness epidemic, suicide rates.
Yeah.
Is there a role for AI to play at a baseline level of support to maybe democratize some sort of support for those who can't afford it?
Thanks for the question. So I'll give you an answer and then I'll have a call out.
And you've got about a minute and a half.
Thank you for that. It's my Pivot co-host, so it says, is there ever a period at the end of your sentences? I think the biggest threat of AI is not self-healing weapons. It's not income inequality, although it'll add to those things. It's not that it becomes sentient and decides to kill us. It's loneliness. And I think that some of these AI relationships and sex bots and characters, people having relationships with AI, is really dangerous. I think that's the biggest threat. I think there's enormous upside from AI, specifically around healthcare. A mother with a child with diabetes spends 5 months, and let's be honest, so is the mother, spends 5 months of her year on that child's diabetes. I think the most disruptive industry in history is U.S. healthcare at the hands of AI. But the biggest danger, hands down, is loneliness as people start sequestering, and this is where I'll end, and this is my call out. There are 3 times as many, I talked about earlier, I referenced earlier, the single point of failure for a boy is when he loses a male role model, right? And there are 3 times as many female applicants to be big sisters as there are male applicants to be big brothers. And I think some of it is just men aren't stepping up, but I also think there's this stigma that if you're a 35-year-old man, maybe you don't have your own kids, and you may have fraternal or paternal love to give, that there's something wrong with you if you're interested in a boy. And quite frankly, I think Michael Jackson and Catholic Church have fucked it up for all of us, because there's a lot of good men who want to be involved in a young man's life, or they're intimidated. They think, I'm not a baller, I don't have kids of my own, I can't help. You just have to be wanting to live a virtuous life and be willing to spend time with a boy. That's it. So my call out is the following. Find a single mother in your environment. Just ask if their son would like to come with you to a game, hang out, wash your car. In sum, if we want better men, we have to be better men.
Well, I think that's a really... I think that's a really powerful note to end on. And I'll just say three things. Firstly, your analysis of the political economy and where we are today is very powerfully piercing. Secondly, the fact you are coming back and fighting to make America American again should throw down the gauntlet to all of us. And thirdly, the fact you're going to be in Aspen, I suspect, means you're going to get deluged with dinner invitations over the next few years. So good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Well done. That's great. Thank you.
Will there be a trade deal between the United States and South Korea? Plus an update on North Korea. All on the Impossible State next.
North Korea is the impossible state. It's a place that stumped leaders and policymakers for more than 3 decades. It has a complex history, and it has become one of the United States' top national security priorities. Each week on this show, we'll talk to the people who know the most about North Korea.
Welcome to another episode of the Impossible State podcast at CSIS. My name is Victor Cha, President of Geopolitics and Foreign Policy at CSIS and Korea Chair, Professor at Georgetown. And this, I guess, will be our last episode before the summer break. We usually take a break in August. I'm joined today by Sid Seiler, who I will introduce in a moment, but I just want to take a minute to say something, not good news for our viewers. CSIS suffered a terrible loss in the last week with the passing of Andrew Schwartz, who was our Senior Vice President for External Relations. Wonderful person, a terrific colleague, only 56 years old. The Impossible State podcast was actually Andrew Schwartz's idea. He was the one who thought of the idea, taking the title of my book on North Korea and saying, hey, you know, we should do a podcast about North Korea. So it's a terrible loss for CSIS, a personal loss for myself. Andrew is a wonderful human being, a larger-than-life figure here at CSIS, and really the father of this particular podcast. So Andrew, we miss you very much, and hope your family are well. But today's conversation is about U.S.-South Korea trade. That's a big issue this week in D.C., but also there are things going on with North Korea. There are always things going on with North Korea which we certainly cannot ignore. And joining me today is someone who is very familiar to all of you, good friend of the podcast, good friend of CSIS, good friend of the Korea Chair, Sid Seiler. Sid Seiler is a senior advisor, non-resident senior advisor in the Korea Chair and in our geopolitics department. He was a national intelligence officer for North Korea from 2020 to 2023. Previously, he was the U.S. Forces Korea senior analyst and senior defense intelligence expert for North Korea. He was senior envoy or special envoy for the six-party talks. He was director on the National Security Council, probably the person with the senior most combination of intelligence and policy experience on North Korea. And so we're very glad, always happy to have him as a regular, semi-regular on the podcast. And there's plenty to discuss. So Sid, thanks again for taking time off from your summer to be with us today.
Victor, thank you for the invitation and the kind introduction.
Sure, of course, my pleasure. So I wanted to start out talking a little bit about the trade picture. I mean, this week the big news was Japan, but there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on with Korea. Wee Sung-lak, the National Security Advisor, was in town in the early part of the week. This was a follow-up from his meeting with Marco Rubio about 2 weeks ago. And clearly the focus is on trying to get a trade deal. I think he carried a letter that sort of had the outlines of a framework of a deal. But I mean, Sid, let me just ask you first. Like, I mean, you're not the trade guys. We're not the Trade Guys podcast. But just in your sort of look at the alliance, how do you see the sort of the trade part of this figuring more broadly in alliance dynamics right now?
Well, if you look at the U.S.-ROK relationship over the years, there's been trade has always been an important issue, and in the past, we typically sought to find win-win situations, understanding that the strength of the alliance in the political and diplomatic and economic realms also contributed greatly to the strength of our security alliance and the message that it sent to North Korea and other adversaries that the U.S.-ROK relationship is indeed ironclad and strong. We've had irritants in the trade arena before. You and I have lived through everything from mad cow disease scare to Apple challenges over Apple exports but beginning with in particular the free trade agreement, just a remarkable breakthrough in terms of kind of an equitable relationship for both sides that both sides benefit from. And now that we're going through a period of examining that, people are kind of pointing towards the unpredictability or unreliability of the United States. I say the fact that we're able to work through this, and I'm confident we'll get some type of deal, kind of shows the resiliency of the alliance across the board, and part of that being, the trade relationship between our two countries.
The clock is really ticking. I mean, they have until August 1st to try to make some sort of agreement while the pause on the sanctions. I'm sorry, the tariffs are still in place. And of course, there was, while the National Security Advisor either was here or was on his way out, there was this announcement of a new deal with Japan, 15% tariffs, investment, some things on rice also, the commitment to purchase more rice from the United States. I think, this puts a lot of pressure on the South Korean government, right? I mean, they are trying to look for a deal that will not just be about tariffs and non-tariff barriers, but they're also, I think, looking at other things, maybe shipbuilding, maybe energy. Energy was also something the Japanese said that they would look at, Alaska LNG. But I think there's a lot of pressure now on the South Koreans because, they've got to get a deal that's as good as Japan, right? It's got to be as good, if not